Hello everyone, Vicsin here. Welcome to my channel. A very sincere welcome, as this is just the beginning. We're in our infancy, so thank you for stopping in and supporting what will hopefully soon be a thriving, exciting channel bringing you all kinds of fun, entertaining, and creative content. I've been doing costumes and makeup and props and crafts for years now, a decade almost, if not more, and it's such a passion of mine. I put so much effort into my art, and now that I have the means, the ability, the time to share that process with you all, I'm very excited to do so and make more of these videos that hopefully will inspire you to create art of your own, or just relax and watch the process as it unfolds. The project we will be diving in deep today is the creation of Baba Yaga's house on bird legs. This project, I'm going to try to avoid saying the word passion like 1,000 times, but this definitely became a passion project. The idea came about far before Halloween ever rolled around. My group of friends got very into playing the game Smite all together for a while. For those of you that don't know, Smite is a multiplayer online battle arena. And there's over 100 characters, and every single character is based off an actual god or folk hero from all these different cultures. Like Hercules is in there, Mulan, Hades. I don't know why I'm just naming Disney characters. One of the characters that our friend Bob really loved to play was Baba Yaga. It sort of became this running joke. And I wanted to dive in and do more research about these characters. You know, being such a fashion and costuming and mythology nerd, I wanted to know more about some of the original images and inspiration for their character art in the game. So I ended up looking up a lot about Baba Yaga through being introduced to her through Smite. And you can't see Baba Yaga without seeing the house on bird legs. It's such a large part of her lore and the mysticism, and there's just something so magical and just like folktale about like this image of this look at this little cottage walking around on these big bird legs. It was so inspiring, but it sort of was just some images I'd saved on my phone. And I went on to working on other projects and other things that came up. But as I kept scrolling through my phone and these images I'd saved, I kept seeing this Baba Yaga house. And it just kept screaming at me, build me, build me, build me. You need to build it. I need to create this house on bird legs. And so I did. October rolled around and I thought this is the perfect time to do this project that's really been calling out to me. It's more involved, but I have the time and the resources. So let's do it. I just started it one day, and luckily my dad and my fiance were more than willing and excited to help out. My dad has a lot of carpentry and welding skills, so that played a huge part in this. I did a lot of it myself, but through him teaching me about using all the saws and welding equipment and things like that. So we built the house in 3 sections. The bottom portion is the legs that are made out of rebar that then are attached to the porch. And that's the main support for the base, are just those metal bird legs. And then on top of that, the house is then its own structure. We built it gingerbread style. So just cut out the shapes of the front and the sides that we wanted. stuck them together with some nails, and then once we had the frame done, you know, our gingerbread sides cut out and stuck together, we then decorated on top with the wood slats. And then the roof is then the third and final structure that sits on top. And because we built it in 3 sections, we're able to take it apart in 3 sections to move it around the yard, move it in place for the photo shoot, put it up into storage when we need to, and things like that. So I didn't film any of the actual construction. If I had, this probably would have had to be like a 3-part video with a lot of very long time-lapse segments, which you guys are still getting plenty of, don't worry. But that was the construction side of it, and now for this video, we're gonna hop into the meat of the painting and the decorating and really taking this blank structure to something that's living and its own piece of art and its own character. Like, I feel like as we worked on this house, it sort of developed its own personality and life, which was so much fun and so satisfying. So for the base paint color, I went with like a grayish purple. I wanted it to be muted and desaturated, but still have interest. That's why I went with this. I made sure to really water down my paint before I applied it. I wanted it to go on more like a stain than a paint, which is why I watered it down so much. That made the painting process a lot quicker, and because it was thinner, allowed me to sort of layer up the different colors and distressing. It stayed wet, which let me blend more easily, and the layers looked more natural as I built them up. Because the paint was watered down, it was very drippy and messy, but I was okay with that because this being an old, worn out house, I didn't want it to look in a very good condition anyway. And luckily the porch was the same color, so any drips I had, I just blended on into the porch. After I was done with the sides, I moved on to the roof. Same thing, just really thinned out paint that I then went over all the wooden boards. And we purposefully picked really beat up, rough looking pieces of wood to use, especially for the roof, to add to that old cottage feel. That was another reason why I wanted my paint to really thinned down, so you could still see all the knots and discoloration in the wood itself. Once the roof was done, I moved on to the shading. As you can see, even once the purple dried, because it was watered down, you still got to see the wood through the paint, more so like a stain, which is exactly what I wanted. So I was really happy with this final result of the first coat of paint. Next, I took a black, a little bit thinned down, but not as much as the purple. And I took a much smaller brush, that way I could get into the crevices. I wanted to add depth and dimension and obviously hide the blank plywood that was behind the slats. I didn't want you to know that that was there. So I went in with the black to darken up in all the cracks. And as I darkened in the cracks, I allowed some of the paint to drip down onto the slats. And this let me create areas of distressing and shading. I just sort of let the paint run naturally, and where I did like drips, I let it stay as a drip. Where I didn't, I went ahead and faded it out and just let that be a darker spot so the wood looked worn and dirty. And just already with this one step, you can see the overall effect coming to life of this old, creepy cabin. Once I had done the bulk of the work with my smaller brush, getting in all the crevices, I switched to a larger brush. Not totally dry, it was a little bit damp. It's good to note that the purple underneath was not completely dry either. So as I went in with the big flat brush and the thin down black paint, I was able to easily blend it into the purple and create a nice shading and gradient. Next, I went on and did the same to the roof. So with the black, I went in on the edge of all the boards to add more dimension to the roof and really enhance the natural shadow there under each plank. I also went in on the edges of the roof, just like I did the edges of the house, and darkened them up to give them a little bit of wear and distressing. Now once the black was down, I had a final third layer to do. I took a green color, somewhat thinned down, but definitely my thickest yet. And the idea is that as wood gets wet, the water would then drip through the top and settle towards the bottom of the planks, where then mold and moss and things like that might grow. So just like I went in and I shaded the top with the black, I shaded the bottom edge of all the boards with the green to add just sort of a, slimy, moldy feel to the whole thing. And it helped create more dimension as well, having the darker black into the purple, into the lighter green. It just really helps the boards stand out and add color and dimension to the overall house. Alright, it's getting dark, I'm losing light, so I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm covered in paint, but so is my house. I really love how it's looking so far. Pretty much just used all the distressing and painting techniques I learned while working in a haunted house. I'll start doing more detailed stuff tomorrow. I'll let this dry. I might start working on some of the more craft stuff over the evening that I can do inside under some actual lighting. But I'm really happy how this is turning out. We'll check back in. It's a little later in the afternoon than I'd like it to be. Unfortunately, it's been pretty gross and rainy and wet outside all day, but that's fine. There's still plenty of indoor stuff I can do, more of the crafty, fun stuff that I'm actually really excited about. And I got some shopping done earlier as well. I've actually been sort of shopping on and off for this project over the last month, collecting things here and there. So I now have this giant box of stuff. So we're gonna go through what all is in the box, and then we'll go on a little time-lapse adventure and see it all come together. So I'm gonna set this down. So I got fake plastic foliage that the plan is to wrap some twine around them and make them look like little herb bundles hanging from the roof. So I got two different colors of this. This one that's got some feathers in it. I thought the feathers would look cool. This stuff I thought looked like dried herbs. But that's the plan for these. What's next? Oh, my idea for the windows, instead of like actually constructing them, I got these picture frames which already look like window frames. And because you can take the backs out, I'm hoping I can like paint the back and also stick some creepy cloth in here like curtains and just make this a window that I can then wood glue onto the house. So I have two of those. Decorative net that I thought would look cool for the fence around the porch. A whole bunch from the dollar store of these make your own ornaments. The plan is to use these for the costume and for around the house, because I thought I could paint them so they just look like swirly swirly jars of mystical potions. I also picked up assorted dowels and this stuff for decorative accents. Paper stem wire. But I thought I could use these. All the Baba Yaga houses, because they're up on chicken legs, they have like ladders and things. So maybe some ladders, some fencing, just things I need. Wood, I don't know. That's things I bought. Oh, I have another jar that I already put some eyeballs in to see how those would look. I might try to like glue the eyeballs down in here so they are all facing the direction, and I'm trying to decide if I want to fill it with like some sort of green liquid or something. Jar eyeballs. Moss. Toothbrush holder. This might look cool with something like this like on top of it. I don't know. It looked like tiny ornamental. I tried to mainly grab things that looked like they were in proportion to the house itself. Like this tiny little tree. I'm definitely gonna put this out by the door. It's kind of like, I don't know, rough, but cute. I also got these that I plan on taking the hands and the heads off of. Maybe doing like a jar of hands or just like a pile of hands. Definitely like a pile of skulls. I don't know why I'm talking like a million miles an hour right now. I guess I'm just getting really excited. These. Yes. Yes. There's some spiderweb in here. Creepy cloth. Which is always great. More eyeballs. More jars. I got this that I thought would look cool on the like front door. Take this off and make it look like a window, like peephole thing. Stuff. Things. Jars. Yeah. If you've been on the internet at all in the past 2 months and do any sort of crafting, which if you're watching this video, those chances are high, everybody's been obsessed with the pool noodle candles, which I'm definitely going to make some of. You know, cut them down, stack them up, hot glue for some drippies. I have plenty of like old drippy candles. So that's probably what I'll work on first. Oh, that was a marathon. That was a bunch of stuff to get through. But I'm excited to get started. I think I'll be able to knock out a bunch of this little craft stuff. It's really just going to be gluing and painting. Just some of my favorite activities. So I'm going to find a nice podcast or live stream of somebody doing some nerdy stuff and get into it. I'm fueled up by my mom's scratch-made butter chicken I just ate. And I'm ready to get to work. The first thing I had to do to create the candles was cut the pool noodle down to size. I measured the size of the house and I knew about where I wanted my tallest candle to end. So I used that as my starting measurement, and once I cut my tallest candle, I just sort of cut the rest down to size and arranged them into natural looking clumps of candles that would have varying heights. My biggest issue while making these is that I initially started using my high temp hot glue gun. When crafting, it's important to know that high temp and low temp glue guns both serve different purposes. The high temp, unfortunately, was just melting the pool noodle, which was fine because I thought, hey, I have a low temp gun, I'll just grab that. Unfortunately, I did not have any glue sticks for my low temp glue gun. So I had to sort of play it safe as far as using the low temp as effectively as I could when it came to making the drips. I tried to use it sparingly and effectively because if I put just the high temp glue gun and tried to create drips, it just like melted right through the side instead of creating drips down the side. I had a few solutions once I ran out of the low temp glue sticks. I tried using the high temp glue, but from a higher elevation, so the glue sort of cooled down as it dripped. So once it hit the foam, it was not as hot. This only kind of worked, so I came up with another annoying but doable solution, which was to pipe individual drips out of the high temp glue stick. And then once I had the individual drips piped out, I could then pull them off of the parchment paper and use a little more glue that I then allowed to cool to attach the drips individually to the candles. This obviously was a lot more time consuming and labor intensive than just going to the store and buying more low temp glue sticks. But it worked. It ultimately worked. So I'm not too mad about it. And then I still tried to use the high temp glue the best I could as far as just filling in the gaps and sort of layering the glue on top of itself so that it wasn't melting the foam that was underneath. And through a combination of different things and patience, I finally got these candles to have the old, worn, drippy look that I was going for. Once all the drips and sculpting were done, it was then on to painting. I coated all the candles in a solid coat of off-white acrylic paint. I will say that I definitely should have used a primer and probably also a top coat, because the acrylic paint did start to flake off of the foam. But once I went on with a base of off-white, I then went through with some yellow to add age to the candles. I started out at the bottom, working the yellow up into the off-white, and then went in with more of a brown shade along the bottoms and in the creases, just to add a little more dimension to the candles themselves since they were all the same color. Once again, using the darker color around the bottom and in the creases, and then blending up and out. Step was to use that same color, but this time going in around each little individual drip. It looks as if I'm going in way too heavy-handed, but I sort of needed to make sure I was getting the paint into the crevices and really like up in beside all the little drips, because then I could just blend that color out and have a very natural looking shadow that helped all those drips that I worked so hard on actually stand up against the base of the candle and make them a little more obvious. So you can see there, yeah, as I blend it out, it all starts to look much more natural. I went in and I did that same thing to all the rest of the candles there that I did on that first one. Once the candles was done, it was moving on to the windows. I didn't want to try to paint anything too detailed into the windows. The idea is that we're looking into a dark cabin, but off in the distance is either a candle or a stove or some sort of central point of light that's further off into the house. So I created this effect by starting with my black, blending into the yellow, and then into a white. And I just continued to paint and blend until I got an effect that I was happy with. I wasn't worried about this looking super realistic. The whole house has sort of a storybook feel about it. So the fact that certain aspects looked hand-painted, I thought just added to the overall like folklore and charm and feel I wanted the whole thing to have. Tested it. It wasn't quite as dark as I wanted. A little too bright. More like there's a giant disco ball inside the house instead of just like one lone candle. So I went in with some really thinned out black and just sort of desaturated the whole thing, and I was much happier with it afterwards. This next step, I don't know if it was necessary. It's kind of a cool effect, but I went in with a string of fairy lights and added it around the perimeter, like where the glass pane initially sat inside of the picture frame, to add some actual lighting to the window. This was kind of painstaking and annoying and didn't end up being the exact effect I wanted, but in the end, having parts of your project that light up is always cool and exciting. Issue is that the lights are too blue. If they'd been more of like a yellow tone like I had painted, I think I would have been happier with them. But either way, they're there. And I don't regret it. After the lights were in place and the painting was done, I used creepy cloth to create some curtains. It took me a while, as you can tell, to figure out exactly how much creepy cloth I wanted to use, how many layers of it I wanted to do, if I wanted it to be bunched up, or how exactly I wanted it to hang. But eventually I just had to go for it, so I put down a bead of hot glue and just stuck it to it, and just went from there. I roughed up the creepy cloth so it looked old and worn, had a little more holes in it. I used my X-Acto knife to then shove the edges of the creepy cloth into the picture frame so it looked like the curtains, were hanging inside of the house. I split it in half so it looked like two halves of the curtains. And basically just continued to fiddle with it until I got something I was happy with. And there you have it, something that kind of looks like a window. The next project was this cloche or globe. I wanted to sit outside the door to give the whole thing a mystical, otherworldly, peer into the future kind of vibe. So I started with the make your own snow globe that I'd gotten from the dollar store. It had this cork, like stopper, that went into it to make it watertight for if you were to make an actual snow globe out of it. And so initially I just built everything on that as a base. Unfortunately, as you'll see me soon discover, the base set up too high. So even though I was convinced it would fit, the hand here did not, in fact, fit inside of the globe. Upon discovering this, I ripped everything off that I had just made and stuck it inside the lid instead of on the watertight base. And this gave me just a little bit of extra room I needed for everything to actually fit inside. The next part was to very annoyingly figure out how to fit a hand plus fairy lights all shoved into the globe at once, but eventually I did it, and we moved on to securing it to the base. This is just that toothbrush holder that I was talking about, a little bit of hot glue, and to make the transition a little more seamless, look a little more natural, I went in and I just used twine to wrap around the plastic base of the make your own snow globe so that this whole thing now looked like one cohesive crystal ball on a podium kind of thing. I don't know. I don't really know what it is, but it looks like something a witch would have outside of her house, and that's good enough for me. Ultimately, this was one of my favorite things to make, and I'm thinking about definitely going to the dollar store and grabbing some more make your own snow globes. Alright, with the candles, the globe, and the windows done, the next thing to work on was the herb bundles to hang outside of the house that I'm sure Baba Yaga uses in all of her spells and potions. These are once again just plastic foliage I grabbed at Walmart. I clipped off the parts of it I wanted to use and sort of distributed them into bundle sizes that seemed appropriate. And then using, once again, hot glue and twine, bundled them up to look like little hanging bundles that you'd find down in a cellar or around an old witchy cabin in the woods. Was a central window to go above the door. My granddad likes to collect all kinds of things, and he had this very cool ironwork thing that he had cut off of an awning. Anyway, it was laying around a shop. I liked it, so I grabbed it. I wanted to make it look like a stained glass window, so I measured out a back piece for it and started painting. I just looked up like the typical stained glass colors, which was a lot of like greens and reds and yellows and purples and stuff like that, and I played around with color combinations until I found one I was happy with. So I went in the center with green fading into a yellow. And then for around the edges, I did red and purple with the same idea of going in and shading around each individual section so they looked like individual panes of stained glass that had like a vague, dim source of light shining through in the background. Using acrylic paints. I guess I should have said that. I'm pretty much using acrylic paints for all of this. And what I'm painting onto is a piece of foam, just craft foam that you can get from the kids section of anywhere pretty much. Comes in really large packs for cheap, so I'll always keep it stocked up. It's so useful. I went with the craft foam because I knew it would hold up in the weather, and hot glue really works very securely on the craft foam, so I knew it would be very easy to adhere it to the metal form. Once the faux stained glass was finished, the next step was just to take everything to the house itself and start putting it in its place and putting everything together. The door here, I didn't film the process for. It was just cut out of some plywood and then painted. And the same thing I showed that I picked up from Goodwill that I talked about using as the window for the door is exactly what I used here. I just gave it a coat of paint to help it blend in with everything else. And I think it looked really cool. I'm very glad I picked that up at Goodwill. For the door frame and just some pieces of scrap wood we had, we weren't worried about getting these too exact as far as measurements and lining it up. It's funny, both my dad and Daniel are very particular, precise people. So creating a house that actually looked a little wonky and old and aged and off-kilter was kind of hard for them. But I think it has enough charm in there without being too precise. We attached the windows just using a nail gun. I did eventually go in and paint the brown frames of the window, something that matched better. We finally got to install the stained glass window, which I was super excited about. To me, this is what really started bringing the whole house to life. I really like the structure the metal gives it. It gives it some architectural interest. And just like that, I was really starting to see my vision unfold. After all the windows were installed, we went in and added fence posts to the porch. We used an old drawer pull as the door handle, and I actually found an old Christmas ornament we had to hang out front as a little lantern. Now that the base construction of everything was done, it was just on to details and decorating. My tea lights finally arrived. So I went in with an X-Acto and hollowed out the candles to have room to fit in the flames. Despite all the complications with the hot glue, I love how the windows look. And definitely a project I would do again and recommend. My dad made this adorable, twisty, windy ladder that he attached to the front, and at this point it was just all hands on deck to get things done. Daniel went in and painted the tea lights to help them blend in with the candles as I went around and hung up the decorative netting as some fencing. I really liked that the netting sort of gave it a bayou feel. She's like this old swamp witch down in Louisiana. This was my favorite part, actually. Just taking everything I had made and crafted and collected and finding spots for all of it along the porch to really bring the house to life, Some skulls, some jars of eyeballs here and there. Isn't that what everybody uses for their exterior decorating? As I did this, my dad went in and took pool noodles that we sliced down the back and wrapped them around the rebar that we used for the bird legs just to bulk them up, make them a little more substantial and noticeable and look more in proportion to the house itself. So this is how the legs ended up looking. And once we moved it and got the roof on, I then went in with the two different types of moss and added it to the cracks and the roof to sort of hide some of the gaps and really give that mystical feel.
Yeah, she's got her freaking stuff that she throws in her pot.
Exactly.
Out there hanging up to dry so she can go in there and a pinch of this and a pinch of that. Hey man, it's a really nice job. I mean, it's decorated immaculately. And on top of that, the way it comes apart in 3 components to be moved is just super radical.
Coming out of this
Oh, look at them bird legs, son. They're big and popping now. I mean, it's radical as hell. Radical. You done got some snaps of it?
Yeah. Which really, we need to do like what Jazza does, and for our final show-off shots, we need to have it lit.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of close-ups and weird angles, then a
yeah.
The whole thing.
Right.
So that's the house. That's the project. Those are the images. And that's how it all happened. I know that this was a longer video. There was just a lot of different components, and I wanted to be able to share as much of the process as possible. So if you stuck around to the end, thank you so much. I hope you were entertained and inspired, because I know I was making this. And it means a lot to share these moments. And I look forward to future videos of sharing more things like this, as well as, you know, outfits and costumes and just more of the behind the scenes of the photo shoots. So if you enjoyed this, if you want to see more of me on a regular basis, you can find me at Vicsin_ on Instagram. And be sure to like and subscribe to catch any future content. Thank you for watching.